I wanted to ask, in both these films, the attempt was to get your material by giving out the camera eye to people who would otherwise have been your subject. So in the first one, you've opened up the surveillance room to the local community. And in the second, you've actually given the families the cameras. But part of your process is also editing this material. There is a certain structuring, a certain build-up, a certain... especially in the Manchester one, there is a certain stop hit at a very particular point. And these are contexts which you have researched from the outside and then gone into. They're not contexts, they're not your everyday contexts, they're somebody else's. Simply because they are separated geographically from you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So these two phases of your work, getting the material and then the editing, did you somehow feel that there is some conflict at all? And as part of what you intend to do with this?
Would you ask me the same question if they were both straight up films that I said I researched and made in Palestine, or we researched and made in Manchester, or in Bombay, or in because it's what you do. You make art. You want to make a film. You want to edit it. You will be credited for it.
What I'm wondering is if even in the editing process, I'm not trying to accuse, but I'm just trying to understand that as an artist, what are the have we sort of asked ourselves, are there other ways to maybe go about even the editing that can hand over some of that power to our subjects?
Yeah.
Of course.
I think just an extension. I think we've given them the power to shoot, right? Would we give them the power to also edit their own material and put it together? Yeah.
One choice. I'm not saying I'm not trying to
corner
you all or judge or anything. I'm just trying to say, but is this a concern as filmmakers that you sometimes face?
You've hit the nail on the head because it's a deep concern. And it's been a concern for many years. It's been a concern from the time I assisted Saeed Mirza in 97 and we traveled around India because it was 50 years of independence. And it was called a tryst with the people of India, which meant we wanted to meet the people of India and tell some grand stories about them. As assistant director, I watched the footage every night. I transcribed all of it. And then when you see and in that process of watching footage really, really carefully, which the director or even the editor who was cutting it never watched, it's the AD who watches it, many significant things happen. One is you wondered why we're making films, we're saying it's post-colonial, this is now an Indian making the film, why are we making it the same way people always made films? That was one thing that sat in my head, say, that gets interrogated in these things. And the second was possibly that there's so much rubbish in the footage. There's this question Saeed will ask. And, Saeed Mirza, he's one of the most important filmmakers and, my mentor. And his insaniyat quotient is pretty high there. And yet, as a filmmaker, you will ask, you will tease, you will ask certain questions till the woman breaks down. And then the camera will zoom into a close-up and into her eyes. And then she'll tell you how fucking poor she is and how screwed up the situation is. Now, all this gets edited out. And these things would trouble me no end. And so in 2007, in collaboration with Alternative Law Forum and Majlis and Point of View and our colleagues in Germany, we set up Padma as an archive. And this is an archive of raw footage. You can see all the Jerusalem footage and CCTV footage, and other filmmakers from Bombay have contributed to the archive. That material can be used, not just by the subjects, by others. It's there. It's an invitation, but it also, for us, when we wanted to do this and say footage should also be accessible and should lead, your film should open up into this world for research, for pedagogy, for understanding film craft, where editing comes in. filmmakers really abused us. They were like, you want us to wash dirty linen in public? You want this to be an expose? It was nothing about that. It was a conceptual thing which merely says films can be beautiful on the inside as well as the outside. So somewhere, these editing choices are ours. Inside the footage, this process and what it enabled, I think it's there. It's in the kernel of every frame. That's what we set out to do. That's clear. There's no manipulation there. Of course we'll edit. These are our choices. You should edit.
What I was really struck by the second film, which I really like, more than the first one. And the first one, for various reasons, it reminded me of a British film that I've seen on Council Flats, but I forget what the film is called.
Ten and Spin.
Sorry?
10 and Spin.
Exactly. So I thought, oh, okay, this is what we are watching. Okay, the second one, what I really liked was what I would call the chance happens, the chance of finding these home movie chaps who turn out to be structuralist filmmakers. You give them 150 meters away from the site, so that's one. They've got that. You give them so much time to shoot their film, so you've got that. You've got this camera that can't do very much. The only problem I had with them, which is a small problem, but I'm very curious about it, is their inability to focus, right? Why was the focus so dull? I mean, I was actually going to ask that. Did you give them did you teach them how to focus? Because I could think like, God, if only these guys would focus, it would be fantastic. And I mean, I say this facetiously, but I'm curious about what. And it reminded me, in its own way, in a perverse kind of way, of Helga Sanders' film Redupers, which was on Berlin when Berlin had a wall around it, a wall through it. So I thought, wow, this is amazing. This is like a home movie version of an art house film. This is exactly what it looks like. And it was so strict about the spread of the sense it kept coming back to that house, right? I mean, in the sense it had its own narrative, etc. So I think you've actually it appears like, this is one of the constraints. You say, okay, you shoot for so many hours, etc. You actually can work fairly well, in the sense you'll end up discovering people who can make a film in some sense. Who have a duration of some kind or another, right? Because I'm so curious. And I'm saying this, tongue in cheek. I hope you realize this, yeah.
It's a 18,000 rupee camera. And it has half a chip, and when you want to take a 360 pan of your city and then zoom into that little window there's going to be a focusing problem. It also takes a while. The chip has to register, so there's overexposure, then it waits 6 seconds, then it finds the thing, and then
focus and exposure
change
are automatic.
Do you have discussions about that?
Yeah, there was some focusing discussion.
Yeah. Shui, you hear that all the time. Slow.
Also, like the exposure does very strange things, like the mountain disappears and comes back, and like this whole, because it's a whiteout, like a camera doesn't know what it's supposed to look at. Like the whole thing about CCTV cameras is that they're supposed to kind of work in all conditions to catch perpetrators and whatever. So the design of the chips and so on are quite, there's no focusing ring on that thing because it's supposed to very quickly focus on what's in the foreground
and it's up there.
And auto exposure.
All they have is a joystick,
and then
like a video game.
the last shot, it kind of starts slipping into black and white because the exposure isn't good enough for color. So there's a mode in the camera which basically cuts it to black and white to get the maximum juice out of
and
the
an infrared
scene.
ring comes on and stuff like that.
So that's kind of what starts to happen. Just at the end, it kind of starts slipping into this black and white mode. So yeah, it's kind of this thing. And it's very, very different. It's like this tank. Like it's this kind of, the camera doesn't move, right? So almost any shot you could identify back to the location that there's a line, kind of an imaginary line pointing from an object back to the location which you've seen in a different direction before. So it's like this friend of ours.
Those are the particularities that you're asking
window.
about.
There's a whole film on China from this hotel window, and like you can trace all the lines back in a way to that space. It's always the same. It's just going. So it's a very different thing from iPhone videos or other kinds of more, I guess, widespread video technology, because it is stuck to the wall traditionally, and the best it can do is kind of try to get out of its like slot by swiveling and shaking off the flies and and that's why they have these mega zoom. They can handle the mega zooms well, much better than. We also work with CCTV, like cell phone camera, where like when you zoom in more than 10x, like it's almost impossible to see anything because But here 220x still is legible
And it's
because
a
the camera
it's a
is
digital zoom. It's just
like
cutting the image and going in. It's not a optical thing.
Right? So it's a very, very steady camera in that sense. Therefore, it can zoom to 200x. Therefore, it can catch people 2 kilometers away doing